Talks by the Independent Press Award. I'm your hostess, Gabby Oldak. To participate in the 2024 Book Award competitions, please visit independentpressaward.com and NewYorkCityBigBookAward.com. This podcast, we will be speaking with Dr. Kimberly Harms, author of Are You Ready? How to Build a Legacy to Die For, which was named a distinguished favorite in the 2024 New York City Big Book Award in the Death and Dying category. Kimberly is an award-winning author and international speaker. She has an extensive range of life and professional experiences with more than 30 years of dental, there's the book, Are You Ready? Grief, conflict, and transitional management experience. She's a commissioned officer in the U.S. States Public Health Service, a clinical assistant professor at Loyola University Dental School, a grief counselor, 3 decades as a clinical dentist in private practice with her late husband Jim in Farmington, Minnesota, a death doula, a civil mediator, a school board chair, president of an international women's organization, the first woman president of the Minnesota Dental Association, and this is my favorite part, a co-founder of 65 Eric Harms Memorial Libraries through Books for Africa and Rwanda. And Kimberly will talk a little bit more about that during our interview. She has suffered many personal losses. We'll talk about that a little bit more also. But her most important role now is mother to her 2 children, surviving children, and grandmother to 6 precious grandchildren. That's a blessing. Kimberly joins us from Minnesota. Congratulations, Kimberly. So wonderful to have you today. Welcome to the Gab Talks.
Thank you so much, Gabby. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So let's dig right in. Explain, Kimberly, what you refer to as the 4th quarter of your life and how it inspired you to write Are You Ready? How to Build a Legacy to Die For.
Well, my husband, Jim, passed away 4 years ago. And at that time, I just found myself, I'd been married since 19, so it's been a long time. I found myself in that transition though between menopause and death. That's kind of scary. It's kind of scary. Like, what do I do now? What the heck? And 75% of women become widows. So 75% of us kind of find ourselves in that spot at some time.
That's a daunting. Yeah.
And I thought, what do I do now? What's my purpose? What do I do now? And I realized that we don't have many workbooks or educational books to help us get through this 4th quarter of our lives. Now, at least I know I'm in the 4th quarter of my life because I'm 68. I can do the math, right? I know how that is.
Right.
But many of you have no idea because either you know you're in the 4th quarter of your life or you don't know because death comes unexpectedly and it's a scary thing. So I decided that time, and also I watch my children and my grandchildren, and I've been through the grief process many times. I watch us try to get through that. And I decided I am going to figure out what I'm going to do with my life after that. And I started researching. And then I thought, this is fascinating information. And I put it in a book form, and I'm just hoping to help people. And my purpose is to help us look at death squarely in the face, know that it's coming. And if you bought life insurance, you know it's coming, and get our stuff in order and prepare our children emotionally so that when we pass away, they are stronger and more resilient because we help them get through that.
So building a legacy is part of that. So Are You Ready? Really, I mean, this is the way I see it. It's really a blueprint to provide a legacy plan for our loved ones, as you said, after we're gone. Many of us are familiar with wills, and you also mentioned life insurance policies, but please clarify, Kimberly, what is the definition of legacy? And is it something tangible?
It's every interaction you have with everybody in your life. And if you live with your legacy in mind, if you realize that every interaction you have is building a legacy with that person, especially when you're interacting with family members, and I have these 6 grandchildren and my daughters and my son-in-laws, you live your life a little differently because it's not about you anymore. It's about what you're leaving for them. And interestingly enough, and Harvard did this wonderful 80-year Harvard happiness study. What they found was happiness over 80 years, time and time and time again, when it's research, is about relationship. And legacy is your relationship. And my legacy to my children and to my grandchildren is for me, for them to know they are loved. I'm so proud of them. And I hope to help them become resilient. I actually talk about when I die, I talk about how to manage grief. I talk to them about all these things. But
I love that. You did put that in the book, and I'm planning on having these conversations with my children, and we'll get back to that. So you wrote, Kimberly, the good news is that every one of us, no matter what the personal circumstances we find ourselves in now, can pass on a positive legacy. But how do we get started? How do we begin building that meaningful legacy?
I think the first thing to do again is to live to understand that you have a job to do. I feel I have a job to do, right? You understand you have a job to do. And look at it as how are you helping the people around you, rather than sometimes I think if you look at our society today, it's about money and, glamour and looks and all of that stuff. And of course, again, the studies have shown that's not where happiness comes from. It's your relationships. So you develop your legacy by building those relationships and teaching them things as you go along, like hard work, how to laugh at yourself. That's a big one. I mean, we have to learn. I'm a speaker, and if you don't know how to laugh at yourself, you're in big trouble because you mess up all the time. So learning to laugh at yourself is a big one. I'm working with my grandchildren on that one. They're playing. I have a little granddaughter that's playing softball, and she struck out. I'm like, oh. So I said, just sit back. You're gonna fail. How do you fail? How do you become resilient? Those are the times when we can pass that legacy on to them. And they're just little moments in life. They're nothing big. You don't have to win an Academy Award or anything else. They're little tiny moments in life with our interaction with our loved ones.
That you build upon. So, Are You Ready is obviously, if you read it, written from a compassionate perspective. Your personal story is poignant. It's heartbreaking. Tragedy, heartbreak. The death of your son, Eric, was certainly the most difficult to read about. Kimberly, can you elaborate on your story and share with us how you rose to joy from what you call the grief pit?
Yes. Well, I lost my mother to suicide when I was 17. And, then life picked up. I married my husband, Jim. I went to dental school because he was really cute. He was going, so I thought that would be a good idea. I married my husband, Jim, when I was 19. We had a great life, small town practice in Farmington, 3 amazing children. And our youngest was Eric. And Eric was this brilliant kid. He was recruited by Columbia. You're in New York. He was recruited by Columbia University. And he was a National Merit Scholar. He was elected to student government at Columbia his first semester there. Like, what the heck? He played in the jazz program. That's why he loved Columbia, because he could come to New York and be in a jazz program and study engineering at the same time. This is just who he was. And he was very loved by his fellow students. And he was on top of the world. He came home from his first semester. He was on top of the world. He had made the dean's list in engineering. He had just had this great semester. He was so happy. He loved Columbia. He went back in January, and 2 weeks later, his girlfriend broke up with him, which is a normal part of life. If she didn't love him, she should have broken up with him. I mean, that's what we go through. But that 19-year-old brain, which was not fully developed in the area of critical thinking, combined with that just impulsive jazz pianist brain, the thing that made him such a great jazz pianist was he was extremely impulsive, was a fatal cocktail. And he took his own life within 45 minutes of a final breakup with his girlfriend. And it was, I can't even tell you, it exploded our world. It was just, you just can't fathom the death of a child.
No.
So we were, where we're live, you can't eat, you can't sleep, all the things, stuck in that pit. I got one nostril kind of, smelling a little bit, trying to get a little breath in. You're a zombie. You walk around dead inside, trying to, make it get through the day. And everyone that's been through a catastrophic loss knows that scenario. And one day, it was a few weeks after we started back at work, and my husband's cousin was talking with my husband outside, walked outside, and he came up to me. The cousin came up to me, wagging his finger in my face, and he said, "Don't you ever let your remaining children feel they are not enough. Don't you do that to them." And I just went, what? No, nope, what are you talking about? And I realized he had lost his brother about the same age of Eric, and he felt that he lost his parents at the
Yeah.
same time,
Yes. I've heard many stories very similar to that.
which is the way it's going to happen if you don't fight. That's what I believe.
Oh,
And
yes.
so at that moment, I was committed. And I looked at my husband. He had just had a liver transplant 6 months before that. He was in bad shape,
Gosh.
personally. So it was, yeah, it was a bad couple of years.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so I was determined that I was going to fight, kick, scream, claw my way out of that pit because my grief just didn't affect me. It affected my children and my husband. And I was going to make darn sure that my kids knew they were enough. It was one of the best gifts anyone could have given to me, and only he could give it, because you can't say that to people unless you've been where you've been, so it was a wonderful gift. And my message really to everyone and through the book is, no matter what happens to you, take the effort to fight. The grief pit's a horrible place to live. So much better to live when you could live in joy and clear and directly with people. So, but that was a
Focus
wonderful.
on what you have, not what you don't.
Exactly. And that's hard to do, because when you lose somebody, that void is just it's like a black hole, and you're just being consumed by it. But over time, and I wish I could say that you go to sleep. If you go to sleep for 20 years like Rip Van Winkle, you can wake up and you're fine. You got to go through the process, and it takes years. It even took me years, even with all my kicking and screaming and fighting out of the pit. I would go up and go down and go up and go down. But every time I went down, I'd go up a little further. And I now can live joyfully with my children. I have these 6 grandchildren that I just
Wow.
adore, and I can adore them without that shroud of
Right.
grief. They
Right.
lose me. They have me fully. And it's a gift to them, but it's a gift to me as well. And I'm so blessed for that rather abrupt, attack in the parking lot. It was one of the best things that ever happened to me.
Sure. Now, Kimberly, you're a dentist. You've been in practice for more than 30 years, and I understand that you became a grief counselor sort of by accident because you lost use of your hand that you drill with.
I know. I was born with only 7 fingers because my mother took thalidomide, and so I have one good hand, and that hand was doing a good job for many years. But a year after Eric died, I was having neck trouble, and I went to Mayo Clinic to try to figure it out, because we dentists have, we got pains in our back. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's just
sure.
part
I can imagine.
of what we have. And they said, "Whoops, we've done testing on your nerves, and you have permanent nerve damage, which could have gone any place, to my toes, to my arms."
Hands of all places as a dentist.
Yes,
But through that, you became a grief counselor. So, so your book is not only written from personal tragedy and triumph, but also from experience. So, as a grief counselor, Kimberly, what would you say is the most important, most critical stage of grief that one needs to go through?
it's we're familiar with the Kubler-Ross stages of grief, but I like to go to the Worden's tasks, because I like tasks, because you can grab onto them, of
Yeah.
mourning, and their acceptance, and then processing the grief. Oh my gosh, that's the hard part, and you can't get through it. You try to squish it down, it's going to come back somewhere else. And then you identify with your new surroundings, and then you have a wonderful place, like I do now. I talk about my son, I talk about my husband, I talk about my mother, with joy and with the understanding that my life was enriched because they were there. And that takes a while. I mean, I think it took maybe 10 years for my son. That sounds like a long time, but I'm so much better now after that time. But it's
Your book is written in 3 parts. So, part one, you outline the various different types of legacies. You refer to them as positive affirmatory endowments. Love, you said that's your legacy to your family. Resilience, you also mentioned that. Mentorship. Is there one type of legacy that you feel is the most enduring?
Of course, love is the big king of legacies, but resilience, I think my mother, I only had my mother for 6 years. Yet I think that anything good that I have become, I became because of her. She gave me so much love during those 6 years.
Wow.
I think she gave me resilience. I've been able to, it might take me a while, I don't bounce back, you kind of work your way back.
You bounce back. That's the key.
Right, right. So I think that's resilience and love are the ones that I put on the top.
Okay. In your research, did you encounter one person? I know you do have some stories in the book. One person who made a really sincere impact on your life, or who you believe exemplifies a life well lived.
Yes, I have this beautiful, beautiful woman in Rwanda, and I met her son. He was a dental therapy student when I first went there back in 2011, and she was it was all she was in Rwanda in 1994 during the genocide, and she lost her husband, and she had 7 children. She took her 7 children to try to escape, and at each time they came to a stop, which happened on these roads. The stops were used to separate the Tutsi and kill them, basically. And each time, somebody at that stop knew her, and they said, "We can't kill her. She took care of my family, or she helped my family." And they moved her along and moved her along, and that happened several times, and she finally was able to escape the country. And yet, when she came back, a widow with 7 children, she adopted my friend Fabrice, whose parents had died. And she was Fabrice's mother's friend, aunt's friend, excuse me, Fabrice's aunt's friend. And she adopted Fabrice. And that's what I see in Rwanda happening. After the genocide, people adopted other families.
And
People that
that's the way they deal with their grief in Rwanda. You said they have a very special way of dealing with their grief.
Yes, they do it as a country. What they decided was that if they allowed their anger and lack of forgiveness to continue, their children would live in the same kind of a country. So what they did is they decided to have justice. The perpetrators went to jail, so they didn't get off scot-free. They went to jail, then they forgave them, and then when they got out of jail after 20 years, they reconciled them back into the community. And sometimes the perpetrators would like build a house or do something for the person that they victimized. They would understand that they would admit what they did and the harm that they caused. And that's what that culture really is built on, personal responsibility. And what they did now is that Rwanda is a beautiful, safe, I go there by myself, country. It has the same safety rating as Canada, safety level 1. It's the State Department rates it just as safe as Canada. And you go to Europe, there's a few countries there that are level 2 that are not quite as safe as
I
Rwanda.
don't think anyone knows that, is aware of that about Rwanda, actually.
It is a beautiful, safe country. And the people there, when I went there and they found out I lost my son, they surrounded me with so much love I couldn't even tell you. And it was a big part of my healing process because I looked around and it made me realize, because at the time I went there, it was only maybe a couple of years after Eric died. It made me realize that my pursuit of getting out of the pit might be possible because these women, and they're mostly women because a lot of the men who were at that time were either in jail or were dead. Wow. They just surrounded me with love and showed me that joy was possible. And the Hutu and the Tutsi women were working together in cooperatives to support each other. So they were not, it wasn't just that they were there and they snubbed each other's shoulder. They were working together. They had accepted each other. They danced together. They lived together. And I thought, oh my gosh, I think we could send every American over there for, a little bit of time just to learn how to get along, because sometimes
learn a thing or two.
So it was wonderful. That was the biggest influence on my life. And it was such a privilege to have relationships with people.
Relationship. That's what you keep saying. You keep talking about that. So tell us, since we're on the topic of Rwanda, we're a little out of turn, but tell us about the libraries that you built in honor of your son, Eric.
Well, Eric was a scholar. He was a Latin scholar. He loved books. He would rescue them from the libraries. If they were taking classical books out of the libraries, he'd go and take them home. They were piled up in his room. He loved books. And so my dear friend, I had come across Rwanda several times after Eric died. And my dear friend, Pam, was on the board of Books for Africa. And she said, why don't we build a library in Rwanda? And I said, oh my gosh, that would be great for Eric. So he went there with the understanding maybe I'd build a couple of libraries. Of course, I connected with the dental students because I was a dentist. And we ended up with 7 libraries, including a law library donated by Thomson Reuters, the first time we were there. And we went there to visit, and I fell in love. I fell in love with this country. And I don't even know how it happened. We donated much of Eric's tuition money because we felt, we couldn't benefit from his death. That's just how we felt. So we kind of took the tuition money and we used it to build the first group of libraries, maybe 20 libraries there. And then I donate every year, but all of a sudden we've been getting donations to make it up to 65 now. And we work through Books for Africa, which is just a great organization. They're their largest shipper of books to Africa and have shipped to every country. But our little Rwandan set of libraries, we have 65, and it's just and I get to meet people that have built little community centers with the libraries in it, and I've met these young people who now have a computer club because we bought computers there, and it's just I can't even tell you what a wonderful privilege it has been for me to have those relationships with Rwanda. I think Rwanda saved me in a way.
So rewarding. I mean, really, just wonderful stories. We are in a death denying culture. You coined that term. Part two of your book examines the notion of death and dying. How do we get to the point where we're no longer fearful of death? I mean, when I speak with my children and I even bring up the notion of one day it's going to happen that my husband and I die, it's their faces turn white and they just can't speak about it. So how do we get to that point where we can have an open discussion about it?
Well, the first thing is I think that as a culture we need to really take a look at how we view death. We almost act as if we die, it's somebody's fault. That somehow if we eat healthy foods and we exercise, we're just going to live forever. And then if you die, then it was the cigarettes or it was this or it was that.
Something to blame.
Yeah, someone to blame. It's just kind of what we've gotten used to.
Yeah.
And so I think we have to get over that and realize that death is part of life. And we have to plan for it. And that discussion is uncomfortable. I have two daughters, both are attorneys, and one of them I can talk freely about this, and she's got all the information and everything. And the other one, she says, Mom, I just don't even want to think about you dying. We just lost Dad. I just don't want to think about it. I said, well, okay, just know it's here, 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 and here. And so for her, what I do is I write it down. I said, just want you to know that this is here, this is here, this is here. What I also did is when Jim and I wrote a will before he passed away, and we sent it to both of them. We said, okay, now this is the will. Take a look at it because we're going to sign it, and speak now or forever hold your peace, because this is your chance. Because our biggest legacy is that you two have the same wonderful relationship you have now. That is so critical to us. So let's get it out now. And so we signed it. They know what is in there. And then what I did too is I took things like all my jewelry that I had. I lined it up. I got one daughter took, I'll pick this one, the other will pick that one. And they went down, 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 down. We wrote it down the will, put it attach it to the will.
Yeah.
And they know they've already decided. So I try to decide as much as I can. Well, another thing that I'm doing too that I think is important, because this downsizing thing, let me tell you, we have to clean up our mess. We have to shed. It's a pit.
Oh,
I mean,
wow. Yes.
I hate it, but I have to do it. And so what I've done is in my will, I'm putting in a clause that says I'm putting this much aside to have all my stuff taken care of and gotten rid of, because you go and take whatever you want, and then whatever's left, we'll get this company to come and clean it out. Because there are companies now that will do that. And by doing that, that takes the pressure off my daughters. I have two daughters, one in Kansas City, one in Minneapolis. And guess which one is probably would end up having to take care of all my stuff?
Minneapolis, of course.
Yeah. Because he's got three kids, and I see my friends doing that, right? So I'm taking care of my stuff. It's like, take care of your stuff, clean up your mess. So I put funds aside to clean up my mess so that the kids don't have to do it, because I'd rather, and they would rather have maybe less money, but more emotional health, not having to deal with that.
Right. It's a lot to deal with. So I'm also hearing folks, don't wait until you're going into assisted living to do all of this. It's the here and now. Get started. We have started with that. So I understand. And I have two daughters as well, laying out all the jewelry. We've done that. They've put dibs on certain things, but it's important. The afterlife and near-death experiences, provocative topics. Describe the profound impact that your faith, I think it's all tied in, has had on your perspective of death and dying.
Absolutely. And in this book, I talk about, I'm a Christian, so I talk about the book because you can't talk about death and dying without talking about your faith, right? So I describe it, but I just say translate as you will, because I want this to be available to everybody.
Of course.
And there are many people, some people think that when you die, that's it. Some people think that when you die, you might be reincarnated. I believe in heaven. I believe that when I die, I'm going to be reunited with my husband and my son and my mother. And one thing when my husband died that made it a little easier is I thought, he's up with Eric now. He's reunited. And as sad as it was to lose him, I knew, okay, he's reunited with my son. I do know that when my son died, that did change my fear. I think I think I was a little fearful of death before that, but once he died, I just was never fearful of death again.
Why not?
And, well, I think because I still felt I was going the same place, right?
Yeah.
And I just kind of felt so many things happened to me after my son died that I just felt there were angels around me. And the angels were people. They were mysterious creatures. They were just people would come up and do things and say things and give me things or give me Bible verses or do things at the exact moment when I needed them. It gave me a feeling that, yes, there is a higher power up there. Somebody's watching over me because they're sending me information. They're sending me encouragement when I need it and in the most unusual of times. So my faith is critical to me. And part of my faith is that because we were given encouragement, I was given encouragement. And I think sometimes through all these little angels, I call them, that were around me, I was given encouragement. And so it's my job now to give encouragement to others. We're all in this together. And I think that as a Christian, I've written some Christian widows books, widows devotionals. And in that, it's just a matter of we go through these things and really nobody quite understands exactly what you're going through unless they've been through it themselves. And as a widow, we have some crazy thoughts. We're all alone. We have to try to manage like this new aloneness thing in our lives. And then maybe our grandkids are getting a little older. They don't need us as much. And this is life. This is not, no one's, this is just how life is. And when you can be around other people that are going through the same things and encourage them, that is so wonderful. And when you can encourage them through your faith, that's even deeper because there's such a deeper meaning to that. Absolutely. So I'm grateful, that I have a faith.
Me too. I am too. As we said in your bio, Kimberly, you wear many hats. You're a dentist. You became a grief counselor. We talked about that. Along this journey, you saw that there were a lot of things that needed to be done. Wills, last testaments, insurance policies. The Death Preppers Workbook is part 3 of the book. I found that part to be, that's really the real meat of the book. It's an invaluable tool designed to empower the readers to prepare for the inevitable and to leave our loved ones with a legacy and also not a mess. That's pretty critical. Can you explain what an emotional insurance policy is? An emotional insurance plan. What is that?
Well, we all know what a financial insurance plan, the life insurance plan is. But I really think we need to prepare our children emotionally for a time when we die. Now, I spent a lot of time in that darn grief pit, and I hope to now they're going to be sad when I go. I mean, that's natural. So there'll be a little delving into the grief pit, but I don't want them at the bottom like I was. I would like to prepare them so that, first of all, they understand that death is part of life. And I want to go next. So I'm just saying I'm next in line. I don't want them to go before me. Been there. But death is part of life. And that my life was so enriched because of them. I want them to understand how much I love them and to know that I want them to have a happy life. Now, I know I've had some success with this because my little Heidi, my little granddaughter Heidi, was sitting at the table a few months ago, and she looked at me and she said, "Nana," and I said, "Yeah, Heidi." She goes, "Well, if what happened to Pop happens to you," and I said, "Oh, do you mean if I were to die?" She goes, "Oh, yeah, Nana, if you were to die." And I said, "Well, go ahead, Heidi. Let's talk about this." And she said, "Well, if you were to die, could we still go on the Disney cruise?"
The important things in life. Yes. Love that. That's a great question.
Yes. Go. And
that's a question. So you also talk about, I have to admit, we discussed this in the green room before the interview began, that the Death Preppers Workbook, in spite of the fact that I have done some prep, there's a lot there. And I did get a little anxious, and I thought, oh my goodness, I have so much to do. Let's start with you. Speak about a legacy folder. What needs to be in that folder? Top 5 things.
Your the directions to where your will, either your will or directions to where they are, all that information so they can get that. You need to have the listing, and it looks daunting, but really it maybe takes a day or so to find all that stuff. And I don't have a good filing system, but get all your passwords, all the numbers to your accounts so they can find them. Make sure you make your kids the beneficiaries of the accounts. Make sure they can get to your bank account. All of those things, all that detailed information. Who's going to take care of the dog? I mean, all that stuff. It's a whole list of it. It doesn't really take that long once you get started. It looks scary, but once you get started, it really doesn't take that long to fill that out. But then I would like to talk a little bit about grieving. I have a little section about, the task of mourning, and maybe just want you to know about that. But you don't all have, everyone's going to be a little different. But I put legacy love letters in there, little Valentines. Yes, little Valentines in there. So
I love that. Well, this is the questionnaire, which I started filling out. You can see that.
Yes.
And it's great. Yes. And you have templates actually for legacy letters, reconciliation letters. That really, really incredible stuff. So very useful. You were telling me about that you're a speaker, and that you were putting together now actually a program, a 6-step program. Tell us about that.
I realize that the hardest part to this is just getting it started.
Right.
It doesn't take as long as you think, but the hardest part's getting it started. So I have the book, so we have all the directions, but I wanted to add a little bit to help people just follow a program and get it done. So I'm developing right now. It should be out within about a month or so. It's called Love After Life, my last minute legacy Love After Life program. So you can show your love after you're gone. And it just basically, it's what's in the book pretty much, step-by-step program on how to get that legacy binder put together. And the intention is that after you go, there's one place where all of your titles of your car and all that stuff is here, one place. They don't have to look anywhere else in the house. And they just open that up and everything is there. But as they're opening it up, so first of all, they're thinking, Mom must love me because she put this all together. So that's a plus. But then they open it up and then they see their Valentines. They see the legacy love letters, and they see that you can express how much you love them even from beyond the grave. And I'm hoping to get that out soon. And I hope also to encourage people they could do it themselves, very simply.
This is a great start. This is a wonderful start.
Or you could get your book club or your Bible study or any type of group that you have to do it together, and then you have accountability, which sometimes I know I need that accountability sometimes. So my goal is to help just prepare the next generation to be more resilient and have a softer landing than we had.
I love that. So as we embark on this journey of self-reflection, Kimberly, is there one vital question that we need to ask ourselves before we decide what we want our legacies to be?
I think the first thing to do is line up all the people in your life that you love, and then ask yourself, what can you do to make them stronger, know that they're loved, and become more resilient? What is it that you can do on each individual person? And it'll be different for, because I have 6 grandchildren. They're all very different. So it's different for each grandchild, but they need to be accepted for who they are, and they need to know that they're loved. Most important thing. That's the best legacy you could ever leave.
So we've learned a lot about you through this interview and in your book. What surprised us? What's something that we do not know about you that would surprise our listeners and our readers?
Well, I was a state of Minnesota porcelain painting champion a few years back. So, I mean, I have some ribbons. So I'm a porcelain painter.
Didn't see that one coming.
Well, like a dentist, but it's just on porcelain.
That kind of makes sense. Actually, makes a lot of sense. It all ties together. Well, this was so great. I love this. I learned so much, and I can't wait to get started to add to my legacy folder. I have a lot of work to do. So, Kimberly, lastly, where can our readers learn a little bit more about you, or a lot more about you, and also purchase your books?
There's a link to my book on my website, which is drkimberlyharms.com. And we also have a link to Amazon, which I can send you as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kimberly. It was wonderful. Thanks for chatting with us today. It was enlightening in so many ways.
Thank you so much, Gabby.
Thank you. Join us next podcast when we meet with G.E. Poole, author of Infrequent Frequencies. Thank you so much. This is Gabby Olzak, your hostess. Keep on reading.